The grain in film is something I crave. It adds a layer of truth and rawness.
It's like a fingerprint on every image.
Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 207 Where are we? The middle of May, 2024.
Middle of May.
Middle of May. Yeah, middle of May. May is a month that's going fast, not like January. May is going pretty.
No, that's true.
I think it's because everybody's just, January is just a miserable month. And I'm sorry for people who like January. I don't like January. It's just, nobody wants to go through it.
I don't have an opinion, but it did go slow.
It lasted forever. Yeah.
May's flying by. It's finally green. Most things are green here now. So
someone flipped a switch here. Whenever it happened, I think between the last episode that we recorded and now, things are just turning green because we had a lot of cold, and then all of a sudden, like one day, like all the things popped up and suddenly there was shade everywhere.
Yeah.
So
we had a day last week, it was at mid 80s Fahrenheit finally.
Oh, really? All right.
And it does that for a day and then it goes back down.
Yeah, we had a couple days that was, right now it's 60 degrees. It's kind of cold and I had my sweater on. So yeah. Would we be having this kind of weather discussion? Why do people talk about weather when they,
because we're in it all the time.
This is just so
we can talk about other things, sort of.
We could talk about other things, but it's like I wondered, did cave people talk about weather? When they first went from one cave to another, and and there was something they had in common. They would point up to the sky.
It's an ancient human thing, I guess.
Yeah, point at the sky.
Water cooler combination.
I just noticed we always start talking about weather here on the just like as if
we're just because we live in disparate geographic locations. It's sort of like, is my weather better than yours? Who's going to win the worst weather sweepstakes? I think that's what it is.
We had tornadoes.
Minus 16.
Here.
That's nothing.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. I can't get to you on those, and you guys seem to have hot temperatures there as well, but.
But they don't last long. They say I've said it before, our winters are mild generally and our summers are mild generally. So we don't get super, super heat.
I hear you have things falling from the sky these days.
Things falling from the sky like cloud again, or you mean smoke again?
No. Someone in your neck of the woods had a piece of SpaceX debris drop on their farm.
I didn't know that one. I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know how recent it was. I saw it I was flipping through YouTube channels and saw what, of course it caught my eye because it was like, is it a UFO? It actually looks like it was a piece of SpaceX, probably a piece of SpaceX booster or some part of it fell on this farmer's field, and they hauled it up into their truck and stuff like that. And anyway, it was in your neck of the woods. It was, Saskatchewan, someplace.
Okay, that's further east. That's where I grew up. So
but then it's your neck of the woods more than it is mine. I don't have
absolutely
SpaceX debris falling on it.
Well, anyway, I have to call home and talk to the mother-in-law or my mother about that.
Yeah, find out. Yeah, but what was this? Why did I bring that up? Because it's weather from the sky.
Well, other things, we had some of the best aurora I've ever seen in my whole life. In terms of colors.
Everybody except me saw the aurora. Your picture, which we'll put in the show notes. I hope you'll be okay with that. I'm sure you are. Yeah. But your picture, just from how you said you photographed it, was pretty flippin' amazing. And then every other person on my timeline, somebody, it's the aurora tonight. It's the aurora tonight. It's the aurora tonight. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Well, when you have the app on your phone, I got to see it, and my wife, she's the one who's most motivated to see the aurora. I guess I'm a little bit more blasé about it, but this one you couldn't not, if you had the time, and you follow the whatever. We've got the aurora forecast, whatever the app's called on the phone, and it was giving us alerts and like, we better get out there. So it's just after midnight. It was just 360 degrees all around us.
Really?
And the picture that I think you're going to want to post of mine is actually pointed to the southern sky. And I think that's been a shared experience by just about everyone on the continent.
Is that the one with shooting the streaking out, like coming out of the, looks like it's coming out of the sky? Yeah.
And it's like you're standing at the base of this plasma cliff.
Yeah. Wow.
It's like directly above us was this little wispy thing. And then it was this cliff of multicolored plasma. Oh, it was just, it was amazing. You would think it would make a sound, it was that vivid. It was very cool.
I am definitely envious of those people who saw it. And we had someone in my building, my friend who's the president of the board, suggested we go up to the roof, but it was cloudy, so we had clouds. Plus, I also fell asleep. I was like, fell asleep, but I saw the text, like, she was saying, well, it looks like it's cloudy. And I'm like, well, yeah, I didn't miss much. So, but, I was wondering if we would have seen it in New York. I mean, I don't know if,
I think they saw it upstate. I think they definitely saw it upstate, southern Ontario, all the way down. There was people posting from Florida. They got red aurora, red, like the magenta is much more common, but when you see red, like car taillight red, that's really rare.
Really?
And I caught some of that. There's little bits of red in some of the aurora that we saw.
Good for you all. And I mean that that's without sarcasm. That's really
I know.
Cool experience to be able to see, some sort of event like that. And be glad that we have a magnetic field protecting us from all that sun farts.
Well, I didn't hear any stories about satellites and power grids, particularly in Canada. Very concerned. GPS is on the satellite side, and then
I heard some GPSs got a little mixed up because, or at least, well, maybe I don't know if they did get mixed up, but they were telling farmers maybe don't try to operate their machinery.
Oh, that could be.
Maybe as a precaution or something like that, because the machinery is they're plowing the fields or doing whatever.
Yeah. Well, Canada really they'd be seeding, this time of year they'd be.
Yeah, and they have to have really hyper accurate GPS, right, for doing that.
Yeah. Well, the old school farmers would just pull the implement and line their little thing on the front of the tractor down to the end of the row, and they'll have to fall back to old school methods of.
Although I don't know if those new John Deere things do that. I mean, they're all so wired up these days.
You can steer it. You should be able to steer it.
They have like a little
GPS.
Compass on it, and a sextant too, just like the old days.
I'm the son of a John Deere mechanic.
Nothing runs like a deer.
Nothing runs like. I got to wear those T-shirts, and I didn't get beat up, but I got teased about it. I used to wear those T-shirts. That kid, that was me.
Okay, I actually had some of those T-shirts as well, and I did get to drive an articulated John Deere.
Oh,
the one with the four wheel. It's 2 wheels on each thing.
Yeah.
Right. I got to drive that around up a lot for a little bit.
Cool.
Because
that's very weird when you turn the wheel and then it's sort of like it's sliding out from underneath.
Right. Yeah.
Like an office chair.
Yeah. I got to be a John Deere person for a little while. But,
cool.
For a city boy, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool. But anyway, I was just going to say that one of the tractors that came out in the 60s and 70s, their design was by Henry Dreyfuss, who did all kinds of industrial design, like IBM and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, those tractors had a little gun sight on the very center of the hood, right at the front. You might remember it when you were in your.
Oh.
And that helps you point the tractor down the row.
Okay. All right. I bet they still have that. Anyway.
They have something like that, yeah.
See, I thought you were going to mention that he designed some sort of camera or something like that. I was going to weave back into photography.
No, it's like you're going to fall back to 60s technology of just steering the tractor instead of sitting there with a little joystick playing a video game while the thing is seeding 100 feet of, corn or something. Yeah.
I keep thinking of the movie Interstellar with automated tractors that they were having, and all getting stuck with the like all coming to the house because of the magnetic anomaly and stuff. So
yeah.
All right. Well, okay, we got through that.
That's enough of that. Yeah.
That was enough of that. Yeah, we haven't talked to each other in a couple of weeks, so we get to catch up. Everybody gets to listen to us talk, and so
for better or worse.
For better or worse, but some people will resonate with us. Some people will just fast forward to this or put us on 2 times speed. So, but photography things. Yeah, what was I going to say? I had already talked about going to the APAD show, right? So I don't want to mention that. That was really good. And did I talk about walking out with one book?
Yep, you did.
Yeah,
and it was the women. What's it called?
Women. Yeah. It was just called Women. Yeah. All right. So I got through that. That's fine. I am now using photographs of that exhibit that show in my class to tell people to go to galleries. Because one of the things I tell my students is like, you want to make your photography better? Go and look at photography. Where you can look at photography, go to galleries. And so I show them pictures of APAD.
And you're very lucky in the town you live in where that's a thing you could actually do fairly often.
Yeah. Or go to galleries. Yes, I can go to galleries. Yeah. I just need to do that. I shouldn't wait once a year. But anyway, a couple of things I want to bounce off here or just get out into the world, right? We're sitting on I just saw this thing pop up on Petapixel. Sorry, this is a gear thing now. I know we don't talk about gear too much, but sometimes this stuff has to come up. And what was it? I just saw it. Hang on. You're going to hear a lot of loud cars outside because there's a lot of jerks who have problems with not having their cars quiet. Oh, anyway. So this just popped up today on Petapixel. Fotodiox has a clever new GFX stitching adapter that connects to 4x5 cameras, which caught my eye because I happen to have a GFX camera and I happen to have a 4x5 camera as well in a box in my closet. A box
which you're not using.
Which I'm not using, which I'm not sure. Well, but I'm also not sure that it works properly. I'll have to pull it out and take a look. There was something wrong with the bellows. It's a Toyo camera.
Toyo, it's a studio camera.
Yes, it's a studio camera. You also can't. Well, so let me describe this quickly. I mean, I'll put the link in the show notes, and maybe people have seen it already. But it's essentially this adapter that goes onto the back. If you know what a 4x5 camera is, with the bellows, it's like the old days with the lens on the front, a plate on the back. There's a ground glass which you focus your image on, and then you pop in a film holder with 4x5 film, and you take your picture. It's actually how I learned photography in high school. We had these cameras. We had to learn on these cameras first. So to me, this is like old school kind of stuff. And I've got a camera, a 4x5 camera, that a friend of mine sold me way back when. I just never really used it. But so this adapter is this plate that goes on, and you remove the ground glass from the back of this about 4x5 camera, and you place this adapter on it, and then it's got the lens adapter for a GFX camera. And essentially you can take even though a GFX sensor is smaller than a 4x5 piece of film, you only get a little bit of the area, but you can do panoramics with it. You can do these stitching kind of pictures with it by sliding your camera along these notches that show up on a scale, and you take 3 shots, and you take one shot, and then you slide it to the right and take another shot, and you do that, and then you stitch the pictures together.
Very cool.
Very cool. And it's only a couple $100, which seems kind of reasonable for something like that, especially if you have a 4x5 camera. But I've been really kind of wanting to try my GFX on something to do something with it and to connect it to a 4x5 camera. If my 4x5 camera works, I know I have a lens on it. That would be really kind of a cool thing. So you might be seeing, you might be seeing pictures. I would love to take this to Greenwood Cemetery, and I would love to do some of my tree pictures with it. I don't know if my lens is too telephoto for it or not. I'd have to see. I got to play around with this thing. I mean, I have to first make sure the camera works. But it'd be kind of cool to dust off that camera and attach a medium format Fuji to it,
and then you'd be creating 300 megapixel photo merges.
Unfortunately, it doesn't do like the whole.
Oh, I see. So it's just
it only goes in one direction. It doesn't do the full 4x5. So you
no, but I mean it's still 302 megapixel.
That's true, right? Yeah, maybe a little bit less because you're doing an overlap, but you can make it a little taller by rotating the camera to the vertical and then sliding it the 3.
Oh, I see. So it's like that other. They have another one. I think the technology came from, where you can put it on the back of some other different camera. I'm guessing like a 120 or something, and you turn it on 4-act. You turn it around. Like yeah. I forget what the context was. And then you take 4 pictures, you turn the camera around, at 90-degree intervals, and then you come up with this kind of a round stitch thing that you put together.
So it's like having a cheap digital back for your 120 camera instead of buying a phase 1 back. Yeah, but you've got to stitch the pictures together, so you're not going to be doing models and stuff like that. No. Most likely. Going to be doing landscapes and stuff.
I'm waiting for the film holder that's all sensor. That's what I'm waiting for. Like you slide that in, plug it into your PC.
It will be coming from, I can tell you, it'll be coming from Yashica on Kickstarter.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be $175.
Yeah, and
I bought some piece of crap thing from that they revamped the Yashica name or something like that, and it was a digital camera, and it was one where you like had these little fake rolls of film that would turn on, I guess, different picture profiles on this little digital camera. Okay. So you literally had, if you want to go to black and white, you have to open the back of the camera, put in this little black and white cassette that would then fire up the black and white profile. I thought it was cool, right? It was a piece of garbage. It was such a piece of crap. And so I saw something else from Yashica, quote unquote Yashica, pop up on. So you want a film thing?
No,
it's going to be it's going to be Yashica branded, and it's going to be from.
I'm just waiting for that, and then I'll get into large format. Until then,
that would be actually. I wonder how much a 4x5 sensor would cost. I mean,
the technology has to be different or whatever it is now. Because
it would have to be.
Whatever. That's just a daydream.
And it would still be a scanning back. You still couldn't do anything moving, most likely, because of the scanning. Anyway, sorry, we're getting too technical. I don't want to get technical too much. My brain, it's too late.
We're daydreaming, man.
Daydreaming, yes. Yeah. So that was one thing I wanted to bring up. I thought it was cool. And it was just because I'm, I haven't taken out my 4x5 camera in a zillion years. I'd love to see what it's like, and hopefully I just don't need to buy another piece of gear, but we'll see. I don't know. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention, today is Monday the 13th when we're recording, and today's OpenAI has announced a new version of ChatGPT, and it does all this crazy stuff now. It can see you. You can have it on your camera. You have it on your phone, the phone app, and it can turn on your camera, and it can see the environment that you're in. It can see you. You can if you go look at the videos on YouTube, you'll see it, like the amazing stuff that this new version does. But bringing that up, I've been playing with ChatGPT a bit with some images as well, especially after I came back from APAD. Because I was curious there was one GPT that popped up that was like photorealistic images, right? And I decided to I pulled out some pictures from Wilhelm Hammerscheu, which I remember I mentioned last episode, but I also recalled that I don't think we talked about it in the previous episodes from that. I think it's because I wrote it in my in our newsletter. So I had newsletter on the brain when I mentioned that. I don't think we ever talked about, at least not in the past couple of episodes, Wilhelm Hammerscheu and comparisons with images. Anyway, his paintings, he's a Danish photographer from the turn of, when did he live? Like in the early 1900s in Copenhagen and stuff like that. And I found his paintings, his photography. His paintings are very photogenic. photogenic, the way he captures.
Photorealistic?
Not photorealistic. There's just something about the way he captures light it's often an empty room, or his wife's in a room, and there's ambient light and stuff like that. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. And so I took one of his paintings, and I took an Eva Rubinstein image and fired those into the Chat GPT, and I said, make a similar image to this, right? Which I'm sure this has been done before. And it was interesting that the images that it spit out, they weren't copies. They had nothing in the sense of like it had just copied the painting or something like that. It made photorealistic versions, like it made a bedroom or something like that. Anyway, regardless, I was oh man, I was blown away by this, and in such a way that I had to cut these things out. I think I made about 6 of them, 6 versions of these pictures. I actually used one of mine of a couple of abandoned chairs, the chairs that I do in the street. I dropped those into them as well, and it spit out, images that were reminiscent of him, but there was a lot of difference in it. Anyway, they were just, there was a quality to them that I couldn't ignore anymore. Like I've been kind of like, you see my Facebook feed is kind of full of, I follow a lot of AI things, and there's something just weird about the AI, images that people are making. And it's just, there's a quality to them that it's almost like they're plastic or so. I can't quite get at it. These did not have these. Now there's no people in these pictures. These were just environments, but there was nothing, like if you look at them, you'd have to look at them really, really close to see if there was any kind of weird, like anomaly. There were very few anomalies. There was a couple that didn't have any anomalies at all. But for me, it was the quality of light that it somehow produced. And it was just mind boggling. And so I ended up cutting them out and sticking them into my photo journal, which I haven't done yet for AI. Or actually I did it once for an AI picture, which I didn't think was an AI picture. And I was about to put it in there, and I found out it was an AI picture. I was like, no, I can't put that in there. I felt like I was being fooled or something like that. Yeah.
Well, that's what people are afraid of.
Well, yeah, they should be. I mean, but again, I have such mixed feelings about this stuff, but I couldn't ignore these. Like, I had some reaction to the images. There were more liminal imagery, as we were like empty rooms with open window and soft ambient light. I'll put those in the show notes, and you haven't seen them yet, I don't think, right? I don't think you haven't seen them, so I'll show them to you so you can see what. Anyway, it was just something that, and this is from the previous version of ChatGPT before today, so this is like a week or two ago. So, I don't know what prompts it's using to get this look, but I haven't seen anything this realistic in a while. And I'm, and I upsampled them using like I used AI to upsample them. I used the Topaz photo AI, which is incredible for upsampling. And I did that, and it added some detail. And I was just like, this is crazy. It's just, I'm happy that I'm living through this time and seeing this, and because it's so weird and cool, but I couldn't ignore this stuff. I just could not ignore looking at these things and actually saying, I actually have a feeling about the imagery. I mean, I guess it's no different than when you see a painting or something like that, other than the fact that it's not made by a human. But if you just look at as a pure image, right? Right. If you put these up in a gallery and you didn't say anything about them being AI, you might assume it's a human being, but you just look at the picture itself and what does it evoke? And I was just having a lot of emotion about this. And like, even though I knew it was AI, I was just looking at the pictures and I was getting affected because the picture was really beautiful. And it would be like a picture I would like to take, or it was an environment that I would like to visit. And it was weird to have that thought, and at the same time realize it doesn't exist. Right. It's like a non-existent place, and anyway, so I really wanted to throw that in to the mix here a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts of this,
Well, I'm going to ask, and I think I already know the answer to this question, but a lot of people are saying that AI is not art. AR generated images is not art. Is that, in your mind, the definition, maybe we should go over what your personal definition is too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is this stuff you're looking at art? Because what you're describing is a person affected by art.
Yes, I would have to say it is. Yeah. If I'm sitting
it's just
there,
art that's not created by a human.
It's not created by a human directly. I mean,
right.
AI is created by humans in some way, but it is doing its own thing. It was having an effect on me in sort of the same way that I was affected by the Hammershøi paintings or Rubinstein's painting photographs. Like it was generating the same thing, and I was like, okay, I'm really curious about. There's one AI artist I follow on Facebook, and he does, I think it's he does very strange kind of environments. He's not hiding that it's AI, and I think he has these funny names for it. And I would love to have him on the show. Actually, maybe I don't know if he'd be up for that. I'd have to show you the work. There's something really unique about it, and I'm affected by his stuff too. And I know, and he's not, he just puts it up there as art. As something. He's not even saying I don't think he ever said it's like a photograph or anything like that. He just says 2001 something or other, or like he just has these kind of funny titles for it. But I would say I'm getting to the point. I'm getting to the point now where the line is shifting. I see a lot of people who take photographs who think it's art and it's crap, right? Or like there's nothing there. Maybe it's someone who doesn't know photography or someone who thinks they know what they're doing. And in my opinion, it doesn't affect me, or I would say the work is terrible. I think I can be a little bit of a judge of that. And so, if this computer system is being able to make stuff that is stirring something up in me. Yeah. It's interesting. So the side note quickly is because it just made me think about this, because I was saying that I used AI to upsample an AI image. Today's demo for ChatGPT, I think they're calling it 4.0 as in the letter O. Okay. They had one AI talking to another AI. And the one AI that they were taught that was being talked to had its camera on, so it was describing what it was seeing to the other AI, and the other AI was commenting on what the AI was seeing. So they were having this discussion back and forth about what one AI was being able to see, which was really, really, really flippin' weird. And so that made me think, like, at some point, some people are talking about like AI is just going to be generating its own imagery. It's going to, there'll be more AI images than human images, and it'll be drawing on itself to make new images. So anyway, it'll be interesting.
And who knows where that's going to go?
It'll be a black hole that will all sort of collapse into. Anyway, thank you for indulging that. It's been on my mind for a little while. So anyway.
That's good. It's cool. Yeah, you'll have to show me the content that came out of that thing.
I will.
That'd be great. So
the next, let's get into what we wanted to talk about.
What are we going to talk about?
What are we talking about? I thought we might discuss grain,
like
grain.
Cereal crops.
Not like I was gonna say. We just talked about John Deere stuff.
That's right. You got it in the head here.
Yes, we're gonna talk about grain silos.
Grain
elevators. Grain elevators. Yeah. Well, so I've been thinking about grain in photographs. Now, what is grain, right? Let's do a little primer for. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, but let's just get the little. I'll let you describe what grain is. Get the ground set here.
Well, I know what it is, but can I actually verbalize what it is? It's when you look very closely at an image, now for me, the way I think is always a black and white image. It's the little speckles that you see.
Well, let's talk about it. Are you talking about film or digital?
Film. I'm talking about film to start.
Okay, let's talk about
film. The little individual components that are of, and each one of those grains is a particular tone. It's like an atom. It's kind of an unchanging thing. And all of these little individual components make up the photograph, the guts of the photograph. That you could, in some way, it's analogous to, in computer land, you might call it a pixel, but it's not that. It's actually the remnant of the little bit of silver that's precipitated out or whatever in the in your film, and well, I guess it would be in the film, because the print is just basically a magnified version of what it sees on the film.
It's actually something physical that's there.
Yeah, that's right? Producing that effect that you're seeing on the image.
Yeah.
So that's
okay.
That's my definition of grain.
Yeah, well, I just want maybe there's someone listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, because we're crossing over into the days of film, and there's maybe people who don't know what grain is.
Yeah.
Maybe someone will listen to this in the future and they're like, what are you guys talking about? Yeah, the little silver halides that are in the embedded in the emulsion of the film. That think of it like a mosaic, right? In a way, like a sort of a random mosaic that, as you zoom out of the negative, when you look at it with a microscope, and then you zoom out, you see the image. Yeah, so little grains, right? And the grains are affected. They are what also create the speed of the film, like how sensitive it is to light. Right. So if you have teeny, tiny grains of material in the film, the light sensitivity seems to be, the film is not as light sensitive.
Yeah, there's less surface area for the photon to hit any individual grain. Yeah.
Right. And as the ISO raises on film, those individual grains get larger, right? That's right. And so they become more visible in sort of the same way, like if you raise your ISO with a digital camera, you see more noise. That would be the I was going to say that would be the analog of it. But that's what happens, right? So if you have a piece of film that's rated at an ISO, we used to say ASA, of 1600, those little grains would be more visible to the eye. They'd be larger, right? Yeah. So what's that bring up for you? I mean, we're talking about film. We're talking about grain. Both of us grew up in the film days. We had to deal with it. It was part of the process. It was, I just pulled out of my archive here this thing that looks like a little microscope with a mirror on it, which is called a grain focuser, which is when
grain magnifier.
Grain magnifier, grain focuser. This goes grain focus. This one says grain focusing scope. So essentially what this is, it looks like a microscope, and when you were enlarging pictures in the darkroom, you would take this device and you would put it on the easel where you would put the paper that was going to capture the negative, and you would look through it, and with that you could actually look at the grain of the negative, and by changing the focus on the enlarger you could actually get a pretty good focused negative onto your paper. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Does that make sense? Yeah. If you didn't have that, you had to try to focus by eye, which was kind of impossible, but this was an easier thing. And when you focus the grain using one of these, then you knew your image that you would print on your paper, as long as your paper was flat, you would get as sharp of an image as you could on that piece of paper. Now, that doesn't mean if the picture was out of focus. They're just talking about the sharpness of the negative on.
You would see the grain whether or not the image was in focus.
Yeah. So, and then you knew, so the grain served that purpose nicely. And if you had a high grain, it was actually sometimes it was hard when you had a low grain film to be able to focus, but you could do pretty good with that. So anyway, fast forward to today, right? And our analogies to grain is digital noise, which is kind of. I don't know if it fills the same void. It has the same effect in some way. Mm-hmm. Maybe for certain cameras and certain not other cameras or something like that. It's also an effect that you can add in Photoshop or any post-processing program, which there's mixed results about that.
Yeah.
And you can also get plugins that add grain to your picture and all this other crap. So anyway.
Right.
Okay.
So for me, grain is something I've been fighting with film. Fighting, yeah. I didn't want grain or the least amount of grain as I could possibly allow when I had my darkroom.
Really?
Yeah. So, and before we get into kind of the aspects of grain, just my personal, because when you were talking about, when we were going back and forth to messaging each other about what we should talk about this week, and then you had grain, and you talked about grain, and then I clinched up immediately because sort of like I've been fighting that demon, that grain devil.
Really?
Because I like to handhold
you and
the
Ansel
camera.
Adams and stuff like that, right?
Sure I like to handhold the camera, and I want so in that way I wanted the fastest film I could use. But I also wanted there to be the least amount of grain, which was an argument to use slower film.
Right.
So I ended up settling, well, I was using Plus X and Tri-X, and I didn't like Plus X because I'd have to be wide open all the time, and I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to handhold. I wasn't going to use a tripod, blah, blah, blah. You shot inside the house, shot in different times of the day. That was not, sunny 16 weather. And, so I was starting up with Tri-X, and then 1986, Kodak came out with T-Max 400. And in the course of, 5 or 6 months, I completely gave up Tri-X altogether. I went to T-Max 400 because the grain was much better. The way I developed it worked. It was smaller, and I seemed to be able to shoot at ASA 400. Things were good. And so I was always working, and every roll of film that I shot, I would look, how was the grain? And so that's been my interest and experience with it. And when digital cameras came out, I kept it to the lowest ISO I could bear. Usually for years and years up until these later Fuji cameras, I've been shooting at the native ISO for the camera because I just couldn't deal with the noise. I didn't want to have to deal with it. And frankly, there was garbage. A lot of those higher ISO, anything above 400, and you're like, no way.
Yeah.
So my newer Fujis, there's not that much of an issue.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the Fuji stuff, because I got something to say about that, I'll go through my, I didn't do a lot of black and white film. In the time periods that we're talking about, like when moving in, because I started doing stock photography and stuff, so I was shooting slides mostly. Same issues though, right? With slide film, right? As you started to raise the ISO or ASA of the slide films, if you could, there was actually there weren't a lot of different ISO film slide films. It would start getting grainier and less useful in terms of enlarging, so if someone wanted to, print a poster or something like that using slide film that was shot at a higher ISO, it would not be so good looking, right? So you'd have maybe the option of having a photographer submit pictures with in medium format or large format, because then the client would not have to enlarge the picture that much. It's the same film, but because the negative was larger, or the slide was larger, it just didn't, you had more detail in it. And so I would shoot Kodachrome 25 a lot, which would require the same kind of things you're talking about, tripod, wide open or something like that. So there wasn't a lot of action stuff that I could photograph. Or actually, maybe I shot Kodachrome 64 most, which is ISO 64.
Yeah.
ASA 64. And then there was a Kodachrome 40, which was indoor tungsten based film.
Right.
and then there was Kodachrome 25, right? Those were the 3 Kodachromes. And then there was Ektachrome's, which was a different process film that had a little bit more range in terms of ISOs. There was a few different ones. And then eventually Kodak came out with a Kodachrome 200 speed film, which was probably one of the most beautiful films I ever used. It had a grain in it, but it was a beautiful grain and it was really, really sharp. So it might have been like the equivalent technology to the T-Max, because Kodachrome was essentially a black and white film with the different color
layers. Yeah,
layers where dyes were added or something. It was an additive process. Yeah. Anyway, so there might have been some similarity there in terms of why that looks so good. But to fast forward a little bit in technology, in that where there was a film called Scotch Chrome, which we probably talked about before. Yeah. Here, it was, believe this or not, it was 1600. It was an ISO. And of course, I just we have to own up to the fact that we've come a long way, in this stuff. This is an ISO 1600, and that was amazing. It was really, really grainy. It almost looked like, the closest I can think of, like, it looked like the old films, maybe of was it the autochrome? Am I thinking?
Oh, the autochrome. Yeah, autochrome.
Autochrome process, a little bit like that. Like when you looked at the grain of that slide film, you could see sort of individual red, green, and blue speckles in it. Like they were pretty visible.
Autochromes used potato starch as the medium.
Yeah, I don't think 3M was using potato starch. Who knows what 3M is doing? I don't know. And it was funny to have a film, but it was Scotch Chrome. It was through 3M, I think,
right? It was 3M.
Yeah, Scotch Chrome, Scotch tape. The same people, right? It's the same people. Scotch tape. They had Scotch Chrome. It didn't have a little plaid on the box, as I remember, but Scotch Chrome 1600, and I used it a lot for creating effects. I started getting into photographing like Greek and Roman sculptures, and going to museums and stuff and photographing that. And I found that was a really, really nice combination, because there was something about the way that film and the grain added to the texture of the marble on the sculptures that I would photograph, and they tended to look a little bit more like flesh. Like there was something that it brought out some life to the sculptures, and I still do that today. I don't shoot with that film, but I still try to mimic that look digitally, because I just loved it. And actually people bought a lot of those images, and I had some really nice prints made and stuff like that. It just worked together. But the grain was something I embraced, like in that. Now, again, when I was photographing, like when Fujifilm was, Fuji Velvia came out, that was ISO 50. You could barely see any grain in that. And that was really good for commercial work.
Yeah. I shot some Velvia too, but to me, it couldn't hold a candle to Kodachrome 25.
No, it was a little easier to deal with, though.
That's true. A little bit more exposure latitude for a slide
more
film.
Exposure latitude, yeah. And the colors we were in that time period when the saturated colors were starting to get more interesting, because printing processes were getting better, so they could show off that like really vibrant color. Anyway, so yeah, I was, depending on what I wanted to get, most times I didn't want the grain just because of the way the commercial photography was. That's what I was doing. But when I was starting to produce my own things, like, there was a Polaroid. Sorry, there was a Polaroid slide film. Did you ever hear of that? It was really weird. It was a black and white Polaroid film that you could process. It was a dry process too.
It's a vague memory of it.
I've got some of the slides someplace. If I could dig them up, I'll show them to you at some point in the future. I have no idea where they are. I do have a scan of one of them though, but it was black and white, and the grain on that was enormous. But I also used it for photographing sculptures as well. It was something about, I think I only shot like maybe 2 rolls of it ever. And it was really weird, because when you processed it, it almost looked like it was a daguerreotype, like a silver, like shiny side of it. It looked like a mirror, almost like mirror-like, as I remember. Anyway, but I was using the grain in those films to really create an effect. And, so I don't know if it's worth fast forwarding now to digital, but, to go to, we're talking about Fuji cameras. So you and I are both Fuji owners, and the newer, more recent versions of Fuji cameras now have a feature inside the menu system in the picture profile where you can add grain to your JPEGs when you're shooting.
Mm-hmm.
The jury's out for me on that in a way, but I don't know yet.
It's a feature it wouldn't even occur to me to use. I know it's there, but I guess I have some trauma or something. I don't know.
Yeah, what is that? Yeah,
really
PTSD
trying to stay away from it. I just feel like that if there's some way I can record, I have no idea. I haven't really said this out loud. It's just like, stay away from me, grain. Get behind me, Satan.
Well, we're talking grain and noise, right? They're interchangeable now at this point. Right?
Yeah.
But let me just ask you this. Well, let me ask you this though. Could you really compare grain to noise? Because noise is really, even today, with the modern sensors, noise can be really ugly, and it can be really like it can really not. But grain can be nice. Like we're there's something more organic about grain. Of course, we're going to go back to this analog stuff because everybody wants to be touchy feely things, right? And digital isn't that. It's
that's true.
It's this. I don't know. I would compare the two, and I don't have words compared to, but you can certainly tell digital noise compared to grain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want either.
I don't want either. No. Because it's a chopping up, like a de-resolution almost of what it is I'm trying to record.
Okay. All right. And as I'm sort of investigating it and finding out, why people like grain, why don't people like grain, and you can kind of tell when someone adds it. There's like it's the kind of same thing in the way like someone adds it like an effect, like a filter, like a rainbow filter, and there's a grain filter. I will add it sometimes in certain types of pictures. I'm still trying to figure out why. Like what is the thing that the reason I'm doing that? But as I was sort of bouncing this around in my head a little bit, like what is it about grain that is generally like nice? Like when I went to the APAD show, by the way, like there's tons of old prints that are printed where you see the grain, right? I mean, it's even some modern prints I think were there, like from modern photographers, more contemporary photographers, which showed grain in the picture. And I was like, well, that's a conscious decision to include that in the image. So what is that about? And I'm thinking that there's a part of it that it mimics sort of the unpredictability of real life, because real grain or there's something that looks natural like that is we don't see the world in a way. We don't see the world without grain. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think human beings, we're not perfect. Our vision isn't perfect. We're not seeing digital kind of imagery, right? We can see when like someone's face looks plasticky or something like that, but like our general vision is like, I would say it's not perfect, and I would say not that it's grainy, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not all there.
Yeah. So what is it about that you don't want? Like, what is? I'm really curious now about this, because I don't
I'm going to be all hypocritical here because I did do some experiments, right? Of course I'm a hypocrite.
That's who isn't,
because I did do some experiments, and it was, and I had sent you an article just before showtime here of from 1957 of a Kodak film from days gone by, and the miraculous film that had a speed of 1600, and so. In the 80s, we had a Kodak film called T-Max P3200, which interested me greatly, because it was funny because the box would say used for scientific and surveillance, like, oh, surveillance. And there was like warnings. There's warnings on the little data sheet that comes with it saying,
right, you're a private detective. You need this kind of film.
Keep it out of, process it promptly because it's, it will start to fog
don't go
because
through
of
X-rays
environmental radiation and all. Okay, whatever. So, and
that's
all
marketing, by the way. That's marketing crap.
Oh yeah. So I shot 5 or 6 rolls of it when it came out, and I loved it. I thought it was great because it scratched my itch of being able to handhold even when I was in a dark environment, like the Stampede grounds, the Calgary Stampede grounds at night. So I had done some photographs, shot down there, and this is like late 80s, I want to say 88. From 88 to 93, I shot a few rolls of T-Max P3200. And what I liked about it was the fact that it allowed me to handhold in really dim conditions, which is a huge, huge novelty. But it was very grainy.
How did you reconcile that with yourself?
I'm just trying to think of the rationalization I made.
Of course.
I really like the way it rendered tones, which is my second. If I got to get rid of the grain, and if I can't do that, it better have some good tone qualities, and it did. And it got actual printable negatives out of it. And I sent you a couple of pictures of example photographs.
Yes, you did. Yes,
that
they look
did.
good. Yeah,
and it was like, but it was. Being on the other side of the tracks, right? It was.
You sold your soul a little bit.
I sold my soul a little bit there.
Yeah.
But it was worth, and I could see the value for others in using that kind of film and that kind of process to do that. And I would do it again. That's just no problem. But that was where there was a product that offered me something in my own personal process that interested me, but it was never going to be that long-term girlfriend. I was never going to shoot, I was never going to shoot that high-speed film all the time, every time. So that's, that was my experience of grain, and I could get tones out of it. But you were saying about, how grain makes it seem like real life. For me, I think grain is a property of film that we came up through the hobby with, and older films were grainier, so all the prints and stuff that we saw from the olden days were grainy, and so I think we kind of learned photography through that aspect, that particular property of photography, the graininess of it. And that part of the onward march of film anyway was to reduce the grain, because science and photographers wanted to, reduce that aspect of film.
Wait, let's dive into that for a second, because where did that come from? I mean, you're talking about us growing up, and I don't think when I was first doing photography, like, I would really care about the grain. I was so more enthralled with the fact that I was like, a print was coming out of, the water or something like that. Or if I'm looking at, we're growing up with newspapers and maybe lesser well-printed books or something like that. But like, where did we get this thing that all of a sudden, I'm painting again with a broad brush, but even today with this, okay, so digital noise was kind of crappy for a while, right? But it's gotten better. But people now, I want to say people are afraid of it, but there's this, I get the sense like noise equals bad and grain equals bad. And like, where the heck did that come from?
I can tell you where it came from for me
Well, but okay, for you. And then for me, the loss of if I want to make prints or I want to sell to clients who want to blow up to billboard size, having a very grainy image is probably not going to be helpful. So, there's that. But it didn't change, like, if I went to a photo show or something like that and I saw prints, like, I don't think, I would be looking at it. Well, I guess it depends on the context of the pictures, but still, like, you wouldn't expect.
And I have no problem with it in anybody else's art, because, even in mine with those T-Max P3200 images, they produce something that I think people would appreciate. And I have no problem with enjoying grainy images. Like, that's not what I'm arguing.
Right.
Here.
Okay.
I'm
So
just saying,
where did it come up? Where did it come up from you?
So when I would see in my photo books that were technical manuals or tutorials, they would show blow-ups of or segments of images taken side by side with all these different films on a 2-page spread or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This is Plus X. This is Tri-X. This is Super Double X Pan. This is Royal X. This is, all the old films. And you would see, I would look at those swatches and go, oh, well, these high-speed films, they have a place, I guess, but I really like the ones that don't have grain. I think they're more truthful or seem to be higher quality. Mm-hmm. And so that stuck in my 12-year-old head. And so that started the whole thing of, I want a handhold. How come my pictures are so blurry? Because shutter speed is too slow. And then it started me down that and I'm not a perfectionist. You know me. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm very loosey-goosey. But wow, I really, if one thing I want, I'll even tolerate pictures that are out of focus, for crying out loud, but they can't. For me, the only aspect of perfectionism for me is to want to reduce the grain as much as practical. Anyway, so that's where it came from.
Okay, that's fair enough. And it's interesting because that's the equivalent of pixel peeping way back when, right?
Yeah, true enough. Yeah.
I mean, it is. You're looking at it. We're looking at enlargements and the comparisons, and even without. I don't know if the book was saying this is better than that. It's just showing the comparisons.
It's just showing here's what they are. There was there's no prejudice at all. That was completely.
Well, I don't know. I think there maybe is, because if you're showing things compared to something else and without context, yes, I think there could be a.
Well, it's like, here's what you're going to get, right?
Right. But it's, again, there has a feeling of a built-in bias there. Like, again, what if nobody's looking at the pictures in the real world that close, right? So it's pixel peeping.
That's true. Absolutely.
It's also not showing you a photograph that was made by it. It's showing you an enlargement of something. So
a fragment of the frame that's barely recognizable. A
fragment of the frame, which is like in real world, means nothing, which is the same thing about camera noise as well. I think that's what, like, fast forward, and it's the same thing. And when we see people, or I see people reviewing cameras and talking about this, that, and the other thing, there's the tendency to say, well, at this time, I can start seeing the noise at this, yes, blah, blah, blah. But again, we're doing it in these situations which are not necessarily realistic, So I just wanted to say that, like it is a pixel peeping. We get into this mode of like, well, even just the word noise, right? When you're walking around the street and you hear noise, it's generally not pleasant. Right? Like it's a word that has a lot of like negative connotations to it. So when you say noise in a digital, the context of digital photography, it doesn't sound nice. So when I'm in a class and
it's a digital signal term, actually, noise, right? That's where it comes from.
But we can't call it grain because it isn't grain.
No,
so we call it noise. But noise, people say, again, when I'm teaching new students about this, I have to put a disclaimer on this. Like, look, I'm going to tell you about when you take the ISO of your camera and you raise it up, you will get this thing, which you might have seen, and we call it noise, blah, blah, blah. And I try to explain it in such a way to not make it sound so bad. I said, maybe the only time you may not want to use it is when you're taking portraits of people, because it just doesn't do good things for skin tones, right? It's like the one thing I was thinking about. But anyway, I go back and forth about this because I also own Topaz Denoise, right? And so, I'm using that, for instance, when I've noticed one of the best uses of it is when I'm photographing birds. And photographing birds, especially now when the leaves are on the trees, and like a bird will be in the shadow because they'll be under the leaf, and I'll want to get the shot of the bird, and I will raise the ISO. In the middle of the day, I could be shooting at like 1600 or 2400 or 2500 or whatever the ISO goes up to, just to get this bird in the shade. And then of course, I bring it back and I look at it, and the digital noise is not helping with the image. It is a nice bird shot. I'm not a bird photographer, but I like making shots of birds, and I want them to look nice.
More of a bird photographer than I am. So,
well, yeah, I got Greenwood here, and I got a big lens, and they're fun. It's a fun thing to do. It's a it's a relaxing type of photography, but I want the pictures to look good, and I love looking at the pictures that I get. And I don't like the digital noise in the picture. It just seems it doesn't create the natural feeling that we're talking about with grain. Like it just doesn't feel the natural. It doesn't feel like the way my eye sees. And so I want to eliminate it. And so, yeah, using AI to get rid of it, using the Topaz AI noise reduction program or whatever. I don't use Lightroom, but they're based on the same things to mitigate the noise. I don't get rid of it all, because I don't like that look. When you eliminate noise in all of these programs, things also don't look real. It's like it's like watching The Hobbit at 48 frames a second or something like that. Sorry for those people who like that movie. I hated it at 48 frames a second. I felt like I was watching a soap opera or something. Anyway,
it felt
had that same look.
Not filmy. Yeah.
But it also it didn't have it. It was also lacking some texture, which felt unreal, which is kind of interesting. Like, Grain is also, very much into films. Like you'll see films. And what's interesting about moving pictures, whereas with still pictures, we only see the one frame and the noise. With a movie, whether it's shot on film or digital, and they add the noise or the grain in the post-processing with digital, when you have a standing image in film, there's still some motion, right? And the motion comes from the grain being projected onto the screen. So you can have a still image of the desert and nothing's happening, but and essentially you could just have a still frame, right? But you would know that the frame is not moving if the frame was just still, right? But in a film, the grain of the film is causing the image to shimmer. Let's say shimmer is not the right word, but there's a natural movement that you see 24 frames a second, which each one of those is showing you a different pattern of grain. Yeah. 120, 1/24 of a second as it's being projected. And so you get that sense of, you feel like you're there, right? So I think that's where it comes with still photographs, is like sometimes you can get that sense that you're there and it's real and there's a texture to it. If you go overboard, then it feels wrong. It doesn't feel right. And then when you get to go into printing, it almost doesn't matter, because prints, like, you have to print your picture now these days huge before you can even see any kind of digital noise in any of the pictures. I think just people have got this sort of, conditioned to not like noise. And we technically can't call it grain, Grain would be nice because it doesn't,
Well, grain is an effect now. It's not.
It's an effect,
property.
but it is. But we've got now noise, and signal to noise ratio. It's so technical. It's just like, it's part of the digital photography thing that I don't like. It's the, in the same way that we call images now files. They're not files. I fall into that too. So they're images, they're photographs, but we talk about them like files and we manage them, and it just loses that connection, that tactile connection with them. And digital's already removed all that from us already, just naturally, So anyway, so to go back to Fuji and their grain, they've got different grain. Some of the newer cameras that have the better processors, you can add grain to the pictures. I've done that. I'm not a huge fan of the grain, because it just doesn't, I don't know, there's something about it doesn't feel right. I'll add it maybe in post-production in Lightroom, but even that, like, there's still sometimes things that just don't feel right. But that's just me. I look at it and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up with real film, and
with real film, there was a physical thing, not a simulation.
Yeah. That's the worst ones. The worst ones are when people had like scanned blank pieces of film and then sell those sort of as overlays that you could put onto your images, so that you have sort of this overlay of grain,
scratches, and
well, maybe not the scratches, although you could have those. But I mean, like, just like the grain, like they'll make a blank piece of film, and
base plus fog or whatever they call it.
Base plus fog, base plus fog. Wow, I forgot all about that. Let's not get into that now. But I
got into sensitometry, man. That's
sensitometry.
That's fun.
Yeah, that actually was interesting. That was interesting.
Became our histogram, right? That
that became a histogram, and it became curves too, right?
Yeah, curves. Yeah,
the curves thing. Yeah, yeah. We're dating ourselves here in a fun way. I can't remember where I was going with this. I
Sorry.
lost it. No, that's okay. That's all right. I'm getting all riled up now in a good way. Yeah, no, putting those fake layer of films on. Oh, so going back to, I just want to go back to noise for a second. Photoshop has got noise filters and like the Gaussian, not Gaussian noise. What is it? I can't remember now. I haven't used Photoshop in so long. But like when I would do a lot of Photoshop work and combination of images, it would have to put sort of a noise layer over the whole image to sort of consolidate everything. Because often when you were doing the composites and stuff like that, you can kind of see that, this
came
part
from
of the image was,
it
came from a different image and it's enlarged. And it, like, so you throw a noise level layer in the whole image to sort of, what's the word?
So it's like a texture. It's
homogenize the image, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just throw it over there, and it covers up any of the kind of work that you did, and you'd find that balance between bringing up the noise enough so that you wouldn't see the patches that you made or anything, and it's still useful like that. But you always had to sort of watch how far you went, otherwise the image would get speckly, and then you would see that because it was digital noise, it was very repetitive or something. Like there was something not random enough about it. So whatever. But yeah, I don't know what other camera has the ability to turn on grain, but Fuji does. And with some of the film simulations, sometimes it looks okay. Like, again, it's all simulations, and that's another part that just sort of eats at me a little bit, because simulations are like, we live in a simulation, we live in the Matrix. This is not real. This is, we all took
those recipes are fun. The
recipes are fun. That's why I like Fuji. The recipes are fun. And, again, what I like about those is that you can post-process it. If you don't like the grain, you can take it away. You don't have to, as long as you shoot raw on a Fuji camera, you can add or subtract the grain whenever you want. As long as you have the raw file, you just reprocess it using Fuji's software on their computer with your camera connected to your computer for some reason. It's really weird. Or you just reprocess it in the camera itself. But I don't know if there's any, I don't know what other cameras have noise. Grain filters built in. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of them you have to just add it afterwards. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. There's this plus and minus of it. Like, I kind of like it still. It's interesting to see someone else produce a digital image with grain in it. And I find myself judging it or trying to figure out, like, why did they do this? Is there a reason? There's a whole bunch of stuff, which is a lot different than the days of film where you didn't even, it was like, okay, whatever, here's the picture, So I never really got bothered by it, but now it's this thing. And I also think that it's, I have to spend some time telling people that digital noise, at least these days with newer cameras. I mean, again, it's hard because people will have a whole mix of cameras, like an early digital Rebel, which has probably got a crappy high ISO sensor on it compared to, a new Sony, which has got a great sensor and you can push it to, 3200, but trying to convince them that, like, don't get too wrapped up in this, like, noise can be good in some pictures and it can be bad in other pictures, and you can get rid of it and you can deal with it and stuff. So yeah, anyway, and why can't we have ISOs that are lower than 100? Why is it such a big deal to get those ISOs so low?
That's a good question. That's you have to ask the manufacturers about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been wanting a sensor that has an ISO of 25, or at least be able to go down like that, so that you'd have like no noise whatsoever.
Well, they compensate for that a little bit with neutral density filters, I guess. Or neutral density.
They do, but you're still working at a higher ISO, and then you're just knocking down the amount of light that's coming through the camera, but you're not changing the
native
noise
ISO
level
for the sensor.
Well, yeah, that whole idea that Fuji cameras are ISO less. They don't have ISOs or something. I don't know. Anyway, that's getting too far into it. I don't know if I've talked this subject out enough, but it would be nice
we clearly
to
have feelings about it, though. I mean, that's one of the more interesting aspects. And it's another thing. It's another one of those things about photography that I actually love, which is everything is a compromise. You want to freeze action? Well, you're going to have to let less light into the camera then. Well, how do I compensate? Well, you got to open up. You want the higher ISO, you're going to pick up some noise. And it's that balance, or when, how many times did we use the word balance tonight? Right. It's just, you got to find your happy medium.
I will echo that. Yeah, exactly. And if anybody who's new to photography is listening to this, if any of my students are listening to that, that's what I try to tell them sometimes, because I always get the sense that some people come in thinking, well, a camera should do everything. And part of what I have to explain is that, no, I have to talk about what you're just saying. Like, well, you want this, then you can't have that. And if you want that, you can't have this. Like, there's no free lunch in this whole thing.
Yeah, right? We can dream all we want, but we are still subject to the laws of physics.
Right. And that, to see someone sort of like, oh, really? Like, yeah, see? You can't, one of the things I've got, well, I'll tell this at the end when we're wrapping up, but in one of my intro to digital photography class, which is really basic. It's only 3 hours, so it's incredibly basic though. I first explain how the shutter and the aperture are dealing with light, right? They're letting light into the camera, hit the sensor, right? There's light coming through the lens, and then it has to open up through this door. Light. And they're okay. I'm like, well, but guess what? They have a second function. And people are like, huh? I was like, yeah, shutter does something about motion, and aperture does something about focus and depth of field. And they're like, see? And then I start saying, right. Now you got to start putting stuff together. It's like, now you got to start thinking, well, I want to photograph the kids, at Christmas time running around the house, right? So I have to use a fast shutter speed, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you use a fast shutter speed, that means no light is coming into the camera. So I need to open up my aperture, or I need to increase my ISO, which means I might get noisiness in it. You could start seeing the light bulb go off in their hands, like, oh, I have to start making choices. I'm like, yeah. And like you just said, I agree with you. It's the fun part of it. I think some people don't think that's fun. Like, they just want to take a picture and create an image.
Yeah.
Right. Well, no, you really need to, this is the fun part. And it's not geeky. It's the creativeness that we need to deal with. And so dealing with, noise and grain and stuff like that, just throw that into the mix as well. But you're right. We have feelings about it. I'm very animated. I have a lot of energy right now. Mm-hmm. You have your trauma about.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what grain god chased me down.
Yeah,
but I think it was just looking at those comparison swatches. Like, that was enough. Like, I want that.
That
thing.
Was it. Yeah. Well, there you go. Okay, I didn't know we could do a half of a show or most of a show on grain and get really energized by it, but okay. It's actually a nice thing to talk about, because it isn't just technical, right? There is a whole bunch of stuff with. There's the aesthetics of it, there is the desire not to have it, there's the what are we being sold in the world, buy better sensors and better software to get rid of this thing called noise. And if we could only come up with a different name for it, if it wasn't noise and it's not grain, what could we call it?
I don't know.
Anybody wants to chime in, send us a message. What would we call grain or noise these days? Or what would we call digital noise that it wouldn't be sounding so bad, right? Noise. Old man yells at noise. Yeah. So that's sense. Yeah. All righty. I think we've done it.
Yeah,
we did it. We did the show. Yeah. So where are we finding you in this wonderful world that we have?
Well, you can find me on the internets, on Vero and Twitter. I'm at WRosin Photo. That's WROSIN Photo. On Instagram, you can find me at Ward Rosin Fine Art. Facebook, I'm Ward Rosin Photo, and I have a little website which I got to post or paste in a gallery with a bunch of my street work, because I got a whole bunch of street work and it's on my other things, but not on there, and it might be fun to put a gallery out there. That's at rosin.ca, and our show unofficial sponsor is Ornis Photo.
Sponsor, Ornis.
ORNIS.photo.
You gonna
what
get
about
any
you,
new
Antonio?
lenses?
Where
You
can
gonna
what's
get any
that?
new lenses? You gonna get any new lenses soon?
No, not.
No, all right.
No. I'm looking at reinvesting in gear and other gear for myself. So we'll be drawing probably from the company to do that. So
okay, cool.
Stay tuned. There
okay, stay tuned.
And Antonio, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me in a bunch of places. Let's say Flickr and Vero at AM Rosario, Instagram at AM Rosario Photo, PHOTO. Website is amrosario.com. Find me on Facebook as Rosario Photo, and our website is streetshots.photography. And subscribe to our Substack newsletter. Actually, I got a whole bunch of subscriptions lately from Barry and X's. Barry and X subscribe to us. So the Candid Frame. So subscribe to the newsletter that Barry and X subscribes to, streetshots.substack.com. You can leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/streetshots. If you want to ask us a question or give us some ideas, drop us a voicemail. And if you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Antonio Rosario. And I did want to mention, for those of you who are in the New York tri-state area, Brooklyn, Queens, there's got to be some of you are in this. I am running a few classes at the Brooklyn Public Library, the Central Library on Grand Army Plaza. Let me just give you a quick rundown of those. I got one coming up on this Friday, which is probably a couple days after we post the show. It's a one on street photography. By the way, these classes are free at the Central Library, so you can go check out their website at bklynlibrary.org. I'll put the show notes. I'll put the links in the show notes. But anyway, doing a street photography class. So, intro to street photography, Friday, May 17th. And one that I'm looking really forward to is Wednesday, May 22nd, Lens and Pen, an adventure in photojournaling. I'm actually doing a class on photojournaling, 2-hour class.
If I were in the neighborhood, I'd audit that one.
Yeah, that was a really good one. And I'm looking forward to doing that. And then let's go back to June 22nd. I'm doing From Lens to Layout, creating your first photo zine. So all of those will be at the Central Library. So if you're in the area and you want to join, come by and see and say hello and hang out and listen to me talk about fun stuff. So yeah, I'll put the links in the show notes so you will get that. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned
those classes at the library, man. That's very cool.
Yeah, thanks. And I got another one. I got another street photography one on June 8th, but I'll mention that because I don't know the address yet. But that's going to be another library in Brooklyn as well. And so yeah, there we go. Very cool. So it's a lot. There's a lot of promos, a lot of stuff, but I'm fine with that. So
you're like one of those comedy podcasts where the comedian's saying, I'm going to be in this town and that town, this town and that town. I had to cancel this gig.
There'll certainly be a comedy show at my things. Yeah, I did a zine class before, and that went over really well. I could talk about it later, but that went over really well. So anyway, Roy, thanks for joining me tonight. I really appreciate the good discussion. I like that.
My pleasure as usual.
Yeah, and everybody, we will see you in a couple of weeks, I hope. So have a nice rest of May, and take care, everybody.
I'll see you. Good night. What I don't like about it is it blinds you in that eye. You don't spend a lot of time focusing because you're going to get blinded. Unless you have a red thing to put over the lens to help,
Yeah, but you have two eyes. Yeah, and you didn't need that. You didn't need once you grain focus, then you didn't need your eye for anything. You just turned the.
No, I didn't want to have some after image of a close up of somebody's eyeball. No, whatever.
Okay.
I was so proud of my dark adapted eyes back in the day. If I go back into the dark room one of these days, I'm probably going to be so disappointed in my ability to see things in safe light.
Probably.
I don't know.
Well.